The most exceedingly awful viciousness in years among Israel and the Palestinian domain of the Gaza Strip have seen handfuls get killed. It followed a month of consistent strains before an open clash broke out. In East Jerusalem, conflicts eject among Palestinians and Israeli police. Palestinians are furious over hindrances that had been put outside the Damascus Gate, access to Jerusalem's Old City, keeping them from gathering and later praying at the Old City's Al-Aqsa Mosque on the first night of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Palestinian discontent had been stirred up before when President Mahmoud Abbas cancelled the arranged elections, verifiably censuring Israel over voting arrangements for Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Hamas, Mr. Abbas' Islamist rivals who control Gaza and were running in the elections, respond indignantly to the deferment. Violence around Damascus Gate and somewhere else in East Jerusalem proceeds at nights. After quite a time of silence among Israel and the Palestinian territory, Israel made airstrikes on Gaza in response to the rockets fired from Gaza at Israel. Conflict spread to the blended Arab-Jewish port city of Jaffa, close to Tel Aviv. In Jerusalem, irate over a spate of filmed attacks by Palestinians on Orthodox Jews, Jewish youth, posted via social media, assault Arabs and chant anti-Arab slogans. Many pro-nationalist Jews yelling "Death to Arabs" marched towards Damascus Gate in protest to the Arab attacks on Jews. Conflicts ejected the site among Palestinians and police attempting to isolate the two groups, harming many individuals. Viciousness among Arabs and Jews spreads to different areas of the city. Militants from Gaza fired many rockets at Israel, drawing retaliatory airstrikes. President Abbas' Fatah group and Hamas censure the approaching undermined removal of Palestinian families from their homes in the Sheikh Jarrah area of East Jerusalem by Jewish settlers ahead of a planned court hearing. Hamas approaches Arabs to form human shields of resistance there. Further, the police and the protesters continued the conflict at the site as it turns into a point of convergence for Palestinian annoyance. Militants in Gaza start sending combustible balloons into Israel over progressive days, causing many fire damages. 2 Palestinian gunmen are shot dead, and a third is injured subsequent after starting to fire at Israeli security forces in the northern West Bank. Israeli authorities claimed the group intended to do a significant assault in Israel. Later on, after Friday prayers, the last of Ramadan, significant conflicts amid the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, harming over 200 individuals. According to Israel's police force, it utilized riot dispersal means, shooting rubber bullets and stun grenades, after officials went under a hail of stones and bottles. The second night of violence ejects in East Jerusalem after the huge number of worshippers prayed at the Al-Aqsa Mosque for Laylat al-Qadr on the holiest night of Ramadan. Police and protesters clashed at Damascus Gate, with police utilizing water cannon, rubber bullets and tear gas against hordes of Palestinians, including some stone pelters. About 17 policemen and more than 120 Palestinians were harmed. Israel's Supreme Court defers the meeting on the Sheikh Jarrah case, following calls to postpone it on account of the developing turmoil. Pressures stay intense, however, and more conflicts happen between Israeli police and Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah and at Damascus Gate. Early morning conflicts break out among police and Palestinians at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, where crowds throw stones and officers fire stun grenades. Palestinian anger has been excited by a yearly Jerusalem Day march planned for later in the day by hundreds of Israeli nationalists to celebrate Israel's capture of East Jerusalem in 1967. The march is due to pass through dominatingly Arab parts of the Old City, which are seen by Palestinians as a conscious provocation. It is rerouted almost too late, yet the climate stays unstable, with more than 300 Palestinians and about 21 police harmed in the viciousness at the blessed site. Hamas issued an ultimatum to Israel to pull out its soldiers from the Al-Aqsa Mosque and Sheikh Jarrah. At the point when the deadline passed without an Israeli reaction, rockets are fired towards Jerusalem without precedent for years. The red line was crossed for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Israel fights back with airstrikes, executing 3 Hamas warriors. Proceeding with an exchange of rocket fire and airstrikes rapidly grew into the fiercest hostilities between both sides since they battled a war in 2014. The assaults on Gaza were probably the heaviest seen since the battling started. As indicated by Israel, it hit facilities belonging to the militant group Hamas and several commanders' homes, yet main roads and electrical power lines were damaged too. There were no quick reports of losses following the strikes. Above 50 warplanes led a 20-minute assault on the Gaza Strip instantly before sunrise. They struck 35 terror targets and obliterated more than 15 kilometers of an underground tunnel network that belonged to Hamas. According to the Israeli military, it had hit the homes of 9 high-ranking Hamas leaders. Israeli soldiers also fired artillery from positions near the Gaza border. More than 3,000 rockets have been fired into the country over the past week. One rocket hit an apartment building in the city of Ashdod, and a few civilians were apparently injured. Palestinian authorities in Gaza, in the meantime, said the overnight strikes had caused far-reaching power cuts and damaged many homes and different buildings. As indicated by the Hamas-run health ministry, the general death toll in the domain currently remains at 227, 64 children and 38 women, with 1,305 injured. According to Israel, more than 130 militants are among the dead, yet Hamas has not perceived this. Calls for a ceasefire have continued to mount internationally. The Israeli strikes followed Palestinian rocket assaults targeting the southern Israeli urban areas of Beersheba and Ashkelon. 10 individuals, including 2 kids, have been killed in rocket assaults on Israel in the past week. The Israeli Iron Dome protection system is claimed to have destroyed 90% of the rockets. But some of the rockets damaged vehicles and buildings, including the Yad Michael Synagogue in Ashkelon. The battle among Israelis and Palestinians is one of the world's most suffering struggles, with the Israeli control of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip arriving at 54 years. Different endeavors have been made to determine the contention as a feature of the Israeli-Palestinian peace measure. The Israeli-Palestinian clash traces all the way back to the furthest limit of the 19th century. In 1947, the United Nations received Resolution 181, known as the Partition Plan, which tried to isolate the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was made, starting the principal Arab-Israeli War. The conflict finished in 1949 with Israel's triumph, yet 750,000 Palestinians were dislodged, and the area was separated into 3 sections: the State of Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Throughout the next years, strains rose around there, especially among Israel and Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Following the 1956 Suez Crisis and Israel's attack of the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria signed mutual defense pacts in anticipation of a possible mobilization of Israel troops. In June 1967, following a progression of moves by Egyptian President Abdel Gamal Nasser, Israel preemptively assaulted the Egyptian and Syrian Air Force, beginning the Six-Day War. After the conflict, Israel dealt with the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. After 6 years, in what is alluded to as the Yom Kippur War, or the October War, Egypt and Syria dispatched an unexpected 2-front assault on Israel to recover their lost region. The contention didn't bring about critical additions for Egypt, Israel, or Syria. However, Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat declared the war a triumph for Egypt as it permitted Egypt and Syria to haggle over a recently surrendered area. At long last, in 1979, following a progression of truces and peace negotiations, delegates from Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords, a peace treaty that ended the 30-year conflict between Egypt and Israel. Although the Camp David Accords improved relations among Israel and its neighbors, the subject of Palestinian self-assurance and self-administration stayed uncertain. In 1987, a huge number of Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza Strip ascended against the Israeli government in what is known as the First Intifada. The 1993 Oslo I Accords intervened the contention, setting up a system for the Palestinians to oversee themselves in the West Bank and Gaza, and empowered shared acknowledgement between the recently settled Palestinian Authority and Israel's administration. In 1995, the Oslo II Accords developed the primary agreement, adding arrangements that ordered the total withdrawal of Israel from 6 cities and 450 towns in the West Bank. In 2000, sparked in part by Palestinian grievances over Israel's control over the West Bank, a deteriorating peace process, and in September 2000, previous Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, Palestinians dispatched the Second Intifada, which would go on until 2005. Accordingly, the Israeli government endorsed the construction of a barrier wall around the West Bank in 2002, notwithstanding resistance from the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. In 2013, the United States endeavored to resuscitate the peace process between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. However, harmony talks were disturbed when Fatah, the Palestinian Authority's ruling party, shaped a solidarity government with its opponent group Hamas in 2014. Hamas, a side project of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood established in 1987 after the First Intifada, is one of two significant Palestinian parties and was assigned a Foreign Terrorist Organization Association by the United States in 1997. In the mid of 2014, conflicts in the Palestinian regions accelerated a military showdown between the Israeli military and Hamas, in which Hamas fired almost 3,000 rockets at Israel, and Israel fought back with a significant offense in Gaza. The encounter finished in late August 2014 with a ceasefire deal expedited by Egypt, yet solely after 73 Israelis and 2,251 Palestinians were executed. After a rush of savagery among Israelis and Palestinians in 2015, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reported that Palestinians would presently not be limited by the regional divisions made by the Oslo Accords. In March and May of 2018, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip directed weekly demonstrations at the line between the Gaza Strip and Israel. The last descent coincided with the 70th anniversary of the Nakba, the Palestinian mass migration that went with Israeli autonomy. While a large number of the protesters were peaceful, some raged the edge fence and tossed rocks and different items. As per the United Nations, 183 demonstrators were killed and more than 6,000 were injured by live ammunition. Likewise, in May of 2018, the battle broke out among Hamas and the Israeli military in what turned into the most noticeably awful time of brutality since 2014. Before arriving at a ceasefire, militants in Gaza fired more than 100 rockets into Israel. Israel reacted with strikes on over 50 focuses in Gaza during the 24 hours erupt. The Donald Trump administration said accomplishing an Israeli-Palestinian arrangement as a foreign policy priority. In 2018, the Trump administration dropped financing for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which gives help to Palestinian outcasts, and moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, an inversion of a long-standing U.S. strategy. The choice to move the U.S. Embassy was met with acclaim from the Israeli Authority, yet was censured by Palestinian leaders and others in the Middle East and Europe. Israel considers the complete and united Jerusalem its capital, while Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. In January 2020, the Trump administration delivered its hotly anticipated Peace to Prosperity plan, which was dismissed by Palestinians because of its help for future Israeli extension of settlements in the West Bank and authority over a unified Jerusalem. As a truce among Israel and Hamas militants consideration moved from the ongoing conflict to the critical humanitarian circumstance in the Gaza Strip, expected political aftermath for Israel's beset head prime minister and restored pressures in Jerusalem. With the happening to another first light, traffic and street sellers got back to Gaza's street. Municipality workers began eliminating rubble and opening streets. A huge number of Gazans who had endured the conflict in schools run by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency or at the places of companions or family members began returning. Eid al-Fitr suppers that had been deferred because of the battling were held. As bulldozers drove sand into shell and missile craters, some Gazans got back to their crushed neighborhoods for the first time since the beginning of the conflict. They surveyed the obliteration while celebrating what many portrayed as a triumph of perseverance over an all the more powerful adversary. Foreign leaders including Joe Biden welcomed information on the truce among Israel and Hamas. Biden, alongside other world leaders, promised support for recreation in Gaza, where Israeli airstrikes focused on Hamas have damaged power and water systems, as per the aid agencies. Biden vowed aid for Gaza, where relief agencies claimed a crisis is brewing. Israel has kept designated spots into Gaza shut all through the majority of the contention, and trucks conveying clinical supplies and relief workers were turned back in recent days. According to Biden, the aid would be compassed with the Palestinian Authority in a way that doesn't allow Hamas to just restock its military arsenal. The United States thinks about Hamas as a terrorist group and keeps away from direct contact.